important. So while you of course call out the data, let me just go across to Mayuresh Joshi then. And Mayuresh, this has been the problem with a lot of banks. Profits have been okay, NII has been okay, loan growth as well has been quite okay, but NPAs has been the problem, and most of these stocks have been punished because of that, with SBI being no exception, down by about 3.4%.
Yes, I think that's been the issue as you rightly put through. So NII, I think in line with what we were probably estimating, because I think it's a very difficult comparison to make with subsidiaries in part of this calculation this time around. The asset quality on the standalone basis definitely seems to be higher and higher than what we had probably estimated. So I think I'm not getting the slippages figure number at this point of time, but provisioning again I think in line with what we were probably estimating. So I think the slippages figure A is going to be very, very important, and as you said, I think the asset quality pressures on the standalone need to be analyzed more carefully in terms of why the spike has been both on the GNPA and the net NPA front.
Again, the question is that it is something that was expected because SBI as well has earlier said that they would be having to make higher provisions because of, the new rules that have come by the RBI. So do you think this crack in the stock is justified?
No, so again, one really needs to understand that all said and done, you're probably looking at the way the growth patterns for these PSU banks will move. On the other hand, if you're probably looking at a slippages number which is much higher based on Q4, where they reported 10,400 on a standalone basis, I think that is one number to be watched out for. Though our expectations are somewhere close to 15,000 on a consolidated basis, including subsidiaries. So in that sense, I think the NII growth has been quite reasonable. But again, I think one really needs to find out, and I'm not getting these numbers right now, in terms of how the breakup actually has been even on the slippages front. So I think that's going to be extremely critical for a bank of this size. But yes, I think one really needs to also understand that for valuing SBI, you also need to take into account the subsidiaries along with the other functions, including the life insurance, the asset management part. So at least at this point of time, based on a price to adjusted book, it trades at 1.4 times. But again, I think a line-by-line item needs to be carefully deciphered in terms of how the spike in asset quality numbers have come through and in what aspect.
Mayuresh, one more factor that one would have to consider is the kind of divergence that these banks may have announced in the annual reports. Would you be able to throw some light on that? Because again, if the divergence is going to be very high, we could be probably looking at an even higher NPA figure.
So it is absolutely correct. So I think what kind of a commentary the management actually gives in terms of the RBI resolution A in terms of the key accounts is again going to be possible. And again, the divergence part of it in terms of the recognition of assets on the balance sheets or the bad assets on the balance sheet so far, and what kind of a figure still needs to get recognized. I think that is going to be very, very critical for a bank of this size. But again, I think it's a known fact for SBI or the PSU banks or the corporate-facing banks in general. I think the stress levels are going to be elevated, as I've always maintained, for the first half of this fiscal. You've probably seen banks like SBI actually shore up their PCRs substantially. They've also created counter-cyclical provision, but even with that, I think the credit cost still will remain elevated. So I think the guidance and performance of asset quality, the aging of the asset quality, the provisions that they've made on the IDC accounts, and again, I think the subsidiary performance on the line online, because I'm not getting the line online at this point of time. I think it's going to be very, very critical in terms of the future earnings perspective for the bank.
I guess what we need to really see is what's the update on the exposure to the 12 IBC accounts and the provisions made for these 12 accounts. And overall, what is the kind of provisioning which has been done for the top 50 accounts by SBI? So the standalone provision figure is there for you on your screens, which looks quite high actually. And I'm just going to go across back to Poonam if she's still there. Poonam, if you could just walk us through what the provisioning has been from SBI in the quarter gone by, both on a standalone as well as consolidated basis. Poonam, do you have more numbers on you, provisioning data?
Not much really, honestly. We just have the PNL right now there, Aisha. In fact, if I look at the provisions itself, as I had mentioned earlier itself, we had the provisions at 9,000 odd crore versus 21,000 odd crore in the last quarter. The provision cover also stands fairly around 60 odd % is the provision cover that we are saying. 60.7 is the provision cover that we can see it from the notes to accounts. But the merged entity provision stood at 61% in the last quarter, and the merged standalone provision cover stood at 66 odd % in the last quarter. So also. There is not proper clarification that 60% provision cover, is this on the standalone or consolidated basis? But yes, there seems to be slight amount of decline in terms of the entire provision cover also. I do have more amount of numbers here in terms of the entire slippages also. The slippages now stand at 26,200 odd crores. I would say that this number seems to be fairly okay. Do note down, Aisha, the slippages, the fresh slippages stands at 26,249 crore. The recoveries stand at 4,646 crore. The upgradations stand at 2,034 crore. The transfer to AUCA stands at 13,176 crore. And also, if I'm looking at the entire, and all these things of course bring to the entire GNPS, including the associates, is at 1.88 lakh crore. So do note that there is a clarification surely. What we are understanding from the management is that the gross NPAs of 1.88 lakh crore is including the associates. That means that these gross NPAs are at the consolidated level, and this is the clarification that we understand. Just looking at these numbers. Mayuresh, what do you make of these entire numbers at the console level?
So again, I think the GNPAs, if you're putting it through, because I'm not getting it in the release, at 1.88, because I think the bifurcation that they've given is probably on the standalone Excel sheets or rows. But largely, I think if this is the presumption that the entire 1.88 that have probably got disclosed includes the subsidiaries, and the slippages figure that you told me, along with the recoveries and upgrades of 4,600 and 2,000 odd crores, I think if you have that into mind, I think yes, we are more in line with what we were expecting. So I think if you exclude the recoveries and upgrades from the total slippages, because the gross slippage figure, I think with net slippage of less than 15,000 crore, which is very much in line with estimates. But on the GNPA side, I think the absolute spike that we have actually seen, if this includes subsidiaries, I think one must really understand from the management whether this is the figure that we are probably going to work out as a base going forward in terms of console numbers.
Right. Mayuresh, I will just clarify again, this seems to be console numbers, because I'll again take you through what we have got from the management itself. The breakup again goes as the opening level GNPS, including the associate, stands at 1.77 lakh crore. The fresh slippages at 26,249 crore. Increase in outstandings at 3810. Upgrades at 2,034 crore, recoveries at 46 crore, and transfer to AUC at 13,176 crore, and hence that is bringing us to the closing level of GNPS, including the associates, at 1.88 lakh crore. So yes, according to what I have got on my records from the management, is that this seems to be that the GNPS number seems to be including the associate numbers, and if I am not mistaken, in the last quarter the GNPS stood at 1.8 lakh crore at the associate level. So it seems that yes, if the numbers that now we are having is at